All right, guys, welcome to the Digital Barbell Podcast. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're listening to this on the audio version or whether you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. If this is your first time listening to us, you just stumbled across this podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we have a lot of good episodes coming up. We have an interview with our former pastor of our church in Tennessee coming up. We have an interview with our friend Patrick Cummings and his business partner about a new opportunity that they're starting that's really cool. Just a lot of good things on the horizon, so make sure you subscribe before you head out after this episode. It's a beautiful day in the Texas Hill Country here. I thought it would be fun to tell the story of when we were living in Idaho and we were like pontificating where we were going to live next, where we were going to move back to Texas, where we're going to stay in Idaho, and what that lady said when we were hanging out over at their house having some drinks.
Oh,
remember that?
yeah. We were hanging out, and she just said out of the blue, "I just want to go live in the Texas Hill Country." We were hanging out at their house, and they had in the really nice neighborhood of Boise, the area that we were living in. They had just had a beautiful spread, and just in the middle of nowhere, she's like, "I want to just go live in the Texas Hill Country." And at that time, we were like deciding between, like, we had actually like looked at some houses to purchase in Boise, and then had this house that we're currently living in was an option, and we were just going back and forth, not knowing what to do. And I was like, we were in a big group of like 8 people, I think, and I was like, "Stop. Have you ever been there?" And she was like, "No, I just feel like sometimes I just want to go live somewhere like where we just have land and we're just kind of living by ourselves or whatever, And it was weird.
Super weird. One of those weird
What
moments.
made you think about that?
I don't know. Just it was a crazy story. Sometimes I think about it from time to time.
It's funny.
I'm looking at this change of. Are you going to say something else? I'm looking at this Monster that I'm drinking, and for health. And it says 10 calories in this whole can, 6 grams of carbohydrates. So all right, I know there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate.
Wait, say it again. 10 calories, 6 carbs.
6 grams of carbs, 10 calories. So 6 times 4 is still 24, right? And then I look a little bit more carefully, and there's 2 grams of sugar alcohol in here. So they're pulling those 2 out of the carbohydrates. That brings it down to 4 times 4 is 16, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes to show that, like, even if you're counting calories, you're not really counting calories. That's why it's so important to have a fundamental understanding of nutrition and not just like how to type.
How many servings is a can like that?
Type the number 10 into your app. It's one serving. These don't really have as much caffeine as people think that they do. Like Bang and Rain and the Rocks energy drink and Jocko's energy drink and some of those coffee ones. Those are like 300 milligrams.
Yeah.
This is only 140 milligrams. So this is just like drinking a cold cup of coffee.
And it gives you a stomach ache because it's got that sugar alcohol.
These make me feel like $1 million. They don't give me a stomach ache.
Or you can have the Arbonne Fizz.
Whatever.
nothing to cause any digestive issues.
Yeah, I don't have any. I'm like 100% every day, rock solid. Is there anything else that we need to announce? Oh, well, this episode's coming out in April. I think we have 5 spots left for the offer that we have out, where if you start a custom training program with us this month, you get a free month of one-on-one nutrition coaching. That's a huge value from a dollar perspective. Yeah. So not only will you save a lot of money, but you're going to amplify your results of your training program by getting help from myself or Haley with your nutrition for a full month. So if you're listening to this and it's still April, you should apply for coaching because you'd be crazy if you don't.
But we're basically giving money away right now.
Yeah, which means less monsters I could buy. So, all right. We got a Q&A episode. We were going to do this last week, so we've been collecting questions. So let's get into these suckers.
All right, here we go. How do you know when you need a legitimate rest day from muscle soreness, or should you just push through?
Push through, baby.
I think there's some things that you should ask yourself first before, and it's hard to just give a general blanket statement. I think on something like this, like do this or don't do this. Yeah. Because sometimes you're just like, I'm a little bit sore and could use it as an excuse to not work out, or you could be legitimately sore where you're going to move badly and potentially injure yourself. So there's all these different levels, of course, of what we're talking about here. But here's some things to ask yourself. Like, are you like under training a muscle group so that whenever you are using that muscle group, you're getting so extremely sore? So you're not doing training on that muscle group enough throughout your weeks of training.
Like if you're never training your hamstrings, or let me say, if you're only training your hamstrings like once every 2 weeks, yeah, you're going to be sore probably every time you do it because it's like a novel stimulus every time you do it. That's really what makes you sore is you're doing too much of something too soon, you're doing something not often enough, or you're doing too much of eccentric loading, which really breaks down the muscle fibers.
Yeah. I mean, this doesn't happen in digital barbell training because I make my clients and all of our clients do a ton of lunges because I think that they're super beneficial for glute strength. But I think this used to be the case for me. Like if I did a lunge, because it was just like this thing you did like once every like 3 months, like a lunge would pop up in a workout, like, oh, this is a novel thing. And I was just like debilitatingly sore after that. I just knew every time I'm going to do lunges, you know, I actually remember being at CrossFit New England one time and there was this workout where you had to like go down this course of lunges and then get on a rower and you're switching back and forth, and they were like, if you have not worked out in a long time, like they have all these like if don't do this workout like RX, like strictly reduce the number of lunges you're going to do because that is something that really makes you sore.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Okay, second thing to ask yourself is, are you overtraining that muscle group day after day after day after day after day? So except back with the hamstrings, if you did deadlifts on day 1, you're doing RDLs on day 2, you're doing lunges on day 3, you know, are you overtraining the same muscle group where you never are getting recovery?
Yep.
And then the next thing to ask yourself is what I mentioned in the beginning, like, are you so sore that you're going to compromise your movement? Like, I think about this with the hamstrings. Like, if I've done so, like, a lot of times it happens if we've taken a break or something, and then we come back to training,
sick or out of town.
Yeah, and you didn't get to train with like barbells. You've just been, you know, and you come back and you do your squats or you do your deadlifts, and your hamstrings are so sore, and you're just like, I can't even bend over safely. Sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like I can even pick equipment up safely. Those are times when I will scale back because I know I'm gonna potentially like not move well just because of the soreness. And the fourth thing to ask yourselves is, are you eating enough? Are you sleeping enough? Are you like not overtraining your body?
Yeah.
Like, are you getting enough recovery?
So those are all reasons that you could be getting sore that you could avoid. And I think the general synopsis of should you skip your training that day or should you train anyway is, can you still train safely and effectively? Is it going to be a productive training session, or are you going to put yourself at too much risk for getting hurt by, you know, using the wrong muscle group on something because of limited range of motion?
Yeah, like if you're like going to squat down and you're going to lower yourself carefully with your knees forward and not move well, you know. But in general, when you start, you feel sore and you start to move, you're going to, you know, increase the blood flow. You're going to feel better once you start moving around. I think it's that initial, like, you get up out of the chair and you're like, I don't think I can work out today. And like, you know, we'll walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes and just loosen up, get some blood flow, and you're like, okay, I can do this.
You know why?
Why?
Motion is lotion.
That's true. Yeah. So
that's it for that one. I feel like we killed it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Send us another message.
All right. What is the difference between strength and hypertrophy training?
This is a really common one. And actually, if you want to learn more about this, you could go back to our podcast series with Andy Baker. I think there were episodes like 206, 208, something like that. I'll put a link to them in the show notes. But
let me give a quick definition because I think it clears it up really well. Like, strength training increases your muscle's ability to produce force. So you're making that muscle stronger.
Yep.
Hypertrophy training increases the size of your muscle.
Technical, nerdy way to say it is your cross-sectional muscle size. Like if you were to slice your muscle in half, is it thicker than it used to be? So the difference between the training is the adaptation that you're causing. Yeah. Strength is largely, like you said, the ability to produce force, and it is largely a function of your central nervous system's ability to recruit muscle fibers too. And strength training, for that reason, has to be designed to recruit a lot of muscle mass, a lot of motor units to be able to lift the weight. So we have to do that in a different way than if we're just trying to make the muscle bigger. but there's an overlap. It's not like you can't train for strength without the muscle getting a little bit bigger. And if your muscle gets bigger because of your training, it's also going to become stronger. So it's not like an either or situation, but you can bias your training based on your goals. Like, power lifters whose sport is just to lift the most amount of weight they can one single time, they train with a strength bias. A bodybuilder who wants to get on stage and just have the largest muscles possible biases their training a different way. So strength training is going to be trained with weights that are very close to the most that you can do one time.
Say 85% or above of the most that you can do at a low rep range.
Right. Because if you think about it, if you have to lift a heavy weight to cause a strength adaptation, you can't do that safely 10, 15, 20 reps in a row. Something's going to break down, whether it's you're just going to be so fatigued in your nervous system, you're just going to snap something.
It wouldn't be truly your 85, it wouldn't be truly your near maximal effort if you can do it 10 to 15 times.
Right. You can't do it.
Right.
So that's why strength is trained in lower rep ranges with heavier weights. And then, if you think about doing like a bicep curl or like a barbell curl, that you're really just trying to make your biceps bigger. Well, you can't throw 225 pounds on a barbell and curl it safely or efficiently and actually cause any kind of stimulus to the muscle. So for hypertrophy purpose, we use a lighter weight. We try to accumulate more reps that causes more muscular damage to cause the muscle fibers to break apart. And when they regrow back together, they grow back in a larger state. So that's, to sum it up, strength training is biased towards heavier weights with lower reps. Muscle hypertrophy training is biased towards lighter weights with higher reps, because that's what you can do both safely and get the maximum benefit from.
And I think we all want both. In the perfect world, we want to both be strong and we want our muscles to grow and show that they're strong. So that's why, we at Digital Barbell, we ebb and flow between both. And we not only do that so that we give our clients both, but we allow, strength training is hard. Strength training is mentally hard. It is physically hard. And if you only did strength training every month of the year, you would eventually break down both physically and I think mentally, because it is tough. So giving your body that break, both and your mind, of going into some hypertrophy training sometimes can be just a little bit more fun and change it up a little bit and give your muscles the ability to grow in size. And then go back to strength training where you are building that strength. And we, like you were saying before, we often also see a lot of overlap there where we have taken a break from the pure strength training cycle and we've been in hypertrophy, that's what we're doing right now. And when we go back to strength, people will often see that they're as strong or maybe even a little bit stronger when they go back to those pure strength.
Because of that overlap between strength and size. And by ebbing and flowing, going through training cycles where you're focused on one or the other too, you get to pick up on a little bit of the fact that because you haven't done, some of those hypertrophy rep ranges for a while on a certain muscle group, you get a little bit of a novel stimulus. So you get a little bit faster progress when you go back to that cycle.
And if you just if you kind of imagine in your mind, what does a bodybuilder look like? You think of a person who has low body fat and they have huge muscles that are popping out everywhere. That's your ideal bodybuilder image. And then you think about a strength trainer. They are a bigger person. They might have a little bit more body fat on them, but they are insanely strong. So we don't if we don't want to probably bias toward either one of those as just a general population.
We want it all.
Lifter. We want both, but not to the extremes.
Speak for yourself.
All right. What is the hype with all this zone 2 cardio?
You sound like, is that supposed to be like Jerry Seinfeld? What's the deal?
What's the deal with all this zone 2?
Have you seen the one about the guy who did all the zone 2 cardio?
I'm not as, in it like you are with the kids or whatever.
You don't look at social media as much.
So I didn't know there was all this hype with zone 2 cardio. I mean, I know what zone 2 cardio is and I know it's a good beneficial thing for us, but I didn't know that people were hyping it up.
I mean, the hype is just that there's more people talking about it, which just means that some influencers out there found out that people want to hear about it and it's getting them attention. So when
they found out it makes your heart healthy, they're like, let's do it.
That's like the cycle of how all this stuff in social media works. Like one influencer, they all follow each other. And I'm guilty of this to some degree, but I see somebody talking about something. I'm like, oh, people want to know about it. I better talk about that. And then 2 people are talking about it, and then 4, and then 8, then 16, and it just builds. And everybody's like, well, this thing must be a big deal because everybody's talking about it. Maybe it's the missing piece in my getting the best results I've ever wanted. So anyway, why don't we talk about what it is, regardless of the hype? To summarize that, the hype is just because everybody's talking about it. There is no hype. There's nothing new.
There's nothing new about it. It is beneficial, but there's nothing new about it.
Let's talk about why it's beneficial.
Zone 2 is that like something that you can do at like just at or above a conversation pace for a longer duration, and an aerobic type thing, like going for a swift walk with a friend, going for a light jog, riding a bike for 30 minutes, something that you can withstand for like 30 or more minutes.
It's not quite like, it's easy cardio, but it's not just going for a walk. It's the whole zone system is really just, different breakdowns of where does that heart rate rank as far as like the maximum that you could do.
So this is in that 60 to 70% of like what's your maximum heart rate can get at based on your age.
Right.
And then it's about, and that's, so just above half.
So it's not super easy, but it's not hard.
But it's not hard. Yeah.
Actually, if you go out to go do zone 2 cardio, you might find it challenging actually to stay in zone 2. Like if your watch monitors your heart rate, you might speak, shoot, I'm like in zone 3.
I've done that before, and it's like you're just constantly like speed up, slow down, because it does get out of that. It gets either below or above it really quickly.
Yeah,
because it's hard to stay.
If you're like jogging on the road or something, you go up a hill,
you'll above it really fast.
Go above it real quickly. Yeah. But I saw this analogy somewhere that like zone 2, spending a lot of time in zone 2 cardio or training zone 2 cardio is really like building the trunk of your tree of aerobic capacity, which is, your body's ability to have a healthy heart, but also have energy to provide you with energy for your training and your regular life. It's like the main block of where your aerobic capacity is built. Yeah.
So I would break it down a little bit into like the energy systems that our body uses. So we have the 3 energy systems. We have the phosphagen, the glycotic, and the oxidative. And so that zone 2 is more in that oxidative, like low power output that our body uses. And it's like the aerobic exercise that we're doing. The 2 other ones are the anaerobic exercises. And the difference between that is in anaerobic that we are generating energy without the use of oxygen.
Glucose.
And in the oxidative or the aerobic, like the zone 2, we are requiring oxygen to produce our energy.
Which is pumped by our heart.
Yeah.
That's why it's, we consider cardio the heart. Yeah. The exercise we do for our heart.
And but they both actually are beneficial for your heart. So that's why we don't just want to stay in that. Like our only source of cardio workouts should not just be in that zone 2. Correct. That is why like we want to have that zone 2 go for like those 20+ minute jog, walk, a longer duration like Metcon where you're just kind of going through it, or with a buddy, you go, I go. Those type of workouts are fantastic, but that is not the only thing that we want to be doing. We want to also be pushing that intensity, pushing into those anaerobic type workouts, because we want to be building both systems in our body, not just the aerobic system. Yeah. So the reason that the other one is beneficial is that it is going to build muscle instead of burn muscle. The aerobic exercises can burn muscle.
Catabolic.
Yeah. So anaerobic will not burn muscle. Let's see. I put down another note here. I'm trying to find it real quick. Woman.
I want to say something else while you look at that though. Is that like doing zone 2 cardio also trains your body to be able to burn fat for energy, because you're not burning glucose during this time. And that's like, let me just make it very clear that does not mean that you are just like melting body fat off your body if you do zone 2 cardio only. It just makes it so that you become more efficient at burning fat for energy versus glucose. But overall, the most important thing if you're trying to burn your body fat is how many calories are you eating per day? Because you can burn all the fat you want doing zone 2 cardio during the day, but if at night you're eating ice cream that puts you in a calorie surplus, it doesn't matter. You're not going to burn body fat for energy.
But the thing here is that yes, it does burn fat, but it is also burning muscle. That's why we want to also dip into the anaerobic exercises where we're not burning off muscle.
Right. Again, an example of why we do it all and why we want it all.
Yep. All right. I think that one was good.
Yep. Moving on.
Okay. I saw you say something in your Instagram story about a way to calculate if food was high protein. Can you remind me of what that was?
Super simple one here that we won't spend a lot of time on. Take the total grams of protein in the snack, in the food, multiply it times 10, and that number should be greater than or equal to the total calories in the food. So
say it again real quick.
Take the total grams of protein in the serving, multiply it times 10.
So let's say 10 grams of protein. 10 times 10 is 100.
So that number should be higher than the calories in the serving. So if you're
okay, so
let's say you eat some like high protein cereal or a protein pancake, and it's got 13 grams of protein in it and 250 calories in the protein pancake. 13, did I say 13 grams?
13, so we're at 130.
Times, and I said there's 250 calories in the protein pancake.
So it's not
That's a big loser if it comes to that actually being a good source of protein. So if
something only has 10 grams of protein, which is 100, you would need to be more like an 80 calorie snack.
And to fall into that, and the reason that this rule exists is because it just shows you, are a lot of the calories in this food actually coming from protein, or does the label say protein and you're really getting a lot of carbs and fat with it? And this isn't a guide to use for every single thing that you eat.
Right.
It's just to help you have some awareness of whether you're being tricked by this clever marketing on the label or not. And if you're truly trying to supplement your protein, make sure that the snack that you choose aligns with this goal, or you're not really supplementing your protein, you're supplementing your total calories and just eating a lot of calories to get a little bit of protein.
Yeah, so the question said to calculate if food was high protein, but I think they're probably referring to when you say like, you'll give your clients like, have a high protein snack.
Yep.
Instead of just like having a snack, in your mid-meal, range, having a high protein snack. So using that rule to calculate it. And
just for example, I had an ounce of beef jerky as a snack earlier that had 14 grams of protein in it for 70 calories. So that is a very high protein snack. Whereas an RX bar has 12 grams of protein for 220 calories, and it has a label on the front that says protein bar.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the labels, I mean, I don't know that there's no rules that would say like what you can and can't do with these labels, but they will put protein bar or protein snack or the word protein on anything that just has, even can have 2 or 3 grams of protein. I actually had some Arbonne bars that they said protein bars on them, and I think they were in like the 3 grams of protein.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not a protein bar. I mean, it's a fine little snack if you want to keep something in I call it like a purse snack. It's like, if I'm super hungry and I know this is clean ingredients, this is what I'm going to eat, but this is not a protein snack. It has 3 grams of protein, so they're writing the word on there. It's very deceiving.
You know what's even more deceiving is protein balls or energy balls. Like you find these recipes for energy balls. Like, here's the ingredients: chocolate chips, oatmeal,
peanut butter,
honey, peanut butter, and
protein powder.
And a scoop of protein powder that gets spread out over 2 dozen.
And 1 scoop of protein powder is maybe in that 20 to 25 if you're lucky.
Divided by 12 protein balls that you made. I mean, if you want to call them energy balls, absolutely, because calories have a ton of energy in them, and these things have a ton of calories in them.
But
so
they're not protein.
Buyer beware if you're eating energy balls. Stick with meatballs.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Does time on a Peloton bike count toward my step goal?
This is a good one.
Question.
We had Blakely and I had to debate this one a little bit, and let's talk about what we talked about.
Let's talk about what we talked about.
Because I've had clients ask me this too, and I have some clients that actually they do supplement their step goal with time on their Peloton bike, and I think it's more applicable certain times of year where maybe it's harder to get outside and walk when it's cold up north. But the point of having a step goal, let's just go back to what the reason for that is. Number one, like, you can improve your health outcomes by increasing your step goal from where you are now to 1,000 or 2,000 steps above that. Plus, it's just a great way to show that you're an active person and take advantage of the benefits of being, moving. The benefit it has for your connective tissue being used, for clearing your mind.
Mindset. Just getting out, taking a 10 or 15 minute walk, man. How many times did you just like, oh, I got to clear my head, and that does it.
It's not supposed to turn into like an extra exercise session. And that's something like I would be aware of with substituting time on a Peloton bike for your steps, is like, you probably bought that Peloton bike to exercise. So you might easily subconsciously get in this mindset of like, oh, I'm going to get some more exercise.
Right.
That's not the point of getting the extra steps in. So be aware of that. But yes, you can use it for extra activity. Some of the drawbacks are steps load your entire skeleton. Walking is a great way to strengthen your low back, especially if you're somebody who has back pain or trying to recover from back pain.
Or you sit a lot in your job and you need to get into a different position.
Right. And you're loading all the connective tissue, especially from your waist down when you walk. Whereas like riding a Peloton bike for your quote steps, all you're doing is pressing down with your hips and knees on these pedals, which can be a little bit repetitive and it's probably more stressful than just walking also. Yeah. Plus you're in this hunched over position on a bike, which isn't, you do that. If you're substituting biking for steps every single day, that could be a lot more time spent, in thoracic rounded position and just, sitting on your butt. That kind of defeats the purpose. So I wouldn't make a habit of it, but in a pinch, I think it's fine. And we have a calculation for,
based on some internet research, around 130 steps a minute. So if you did about a 10-minute ride, that could equal about 1,300 steps towards your step goal.
Yeah, and that would be at not an exercise pace.
Like the conversation, like you're just going for a walk with a friend kind of pace.
Yeah, because you don't want to turn this into an exercise session that now you're having to recover from. You know what I mean? Like you can't throw an extra 30 minutes of Peloton on top of your training.
Yeah, it's like a dog walk. Like you're taking your dogs for a walk. That's like kind of the genre you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I do think but going back to like what does going on a walk do for you, especially like mentally and stuff. I think like I can picture like sitting on a bike. You could be easily doing that with like your phone in your hand. You could be easily doing that like watching TV or watching a video or something like that, which I think was not as beneficial overall. But in it's better. Obviously, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Like if this is like you need to be in the house with the kids and you want to get activity in, yes. If it's raining or snowing or whatever outside and you want to get activity in, yes. Like all of these. I mean, same thing with our treadmill. Honestly, it's like walking outside is way more beneficial overall than walking on the treadmill. But like if we need, it's late at night and we need to do it, or if it's raining or whatever, and we can't leave the office, that's the option. I think it's kind of the same idea.
Good point.
Oh, plus I was posting a little video about this yesterday. Our treadmill, which we still recommend this treadmill, but I don't know, for some reason ours, when you run, is slipping. It is terrifying. I'm like, and it only does it like right in the beginning. Like you push it all the way up and you're like, start to run on it. And then it like does like 2 or 3 times where the pad slips and you're just like, it jerks you. I'm like terrified to fall. So I'm like now running, like holding on to like, I'm like, I'm not getting the benefit. I need to just go run outside because I'm in there holding on to these bars, like terrified, like so gingerly.
I tell you what, when that thing slips, it takes you from zone 2 to zone 3 pretty quick.
Yeah, it really does. All right. This is funny.
Go forth and ride your Peloton bike.
What do you guys like about your camper? I'm thinking about getting one and I'm looking at options.
I want to know what kind they're thinking about getting. And I was actually just messaging with your client, Jason, today about, because they went camping last weekend. I got him to send me a picture of their camper. They've been doing it since 2007.
This
is their first trailer camper. They've had the ones that you drive up until this point.
Oh, okay.
But he said they need enough where they can be spread out. Like they don't want to be on top of each other like we are in our camper.
Yeah. I mean, I think we like our camper.
Why did we buy the camper that we bought? Why don't you say that?
It was your dad's fault. We blame his dad. Quick story is my brother bought a camper and then your dad happened to be over here when my brother brought it here and everything, and he was like, hey, look at these little teardrop campers, and I didn't know these existed, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're adorable. And then we ended up like, I sold some property, some family property, and we were like, okay, this would be a great use of this money. It would be like to buy a camper and do something useful with it, like, enhance our life with it instead of just like, whatever. Anyway, that's the story about how we got the camper. But we go for the cute aesthetics of the outside, number one, and the quality of the inside. Like the lower range campers can be massive, but sometimes break a lot. Like my brother's camper is constantly breaking. And this one is solid as a rock. Like we have not had any issues. We, took it in for its like year service, and they like the blinds were a little bit messed up or whatever, but they did all the things, and it's, knock on wood, it's really holds up.
Yeah. Campers are notorious for being terrible quality.
Yeah.
It's like you just get online and search and you'll see there's tons of lawsuits against camper companies, especially since the pandemic hit and they just had to crank them out at record pace. Quality kind of fell by the wayside.
I feel like we got in like right at the right time. For that too is like, I think like we got some of the last ones that were like, they were like taking their time with, and now like they gave like all the options, and I think they've pulled back on the options that they give you now. Like with the campers that we bought, we were between the New Camp and the Little Guy is the brand. That's what we call it, Little Guy. And after going in both, I thought we were going to go with the New Camp, but after going inside of it, the Little Guys, they actually like took the like concept of the New Camp and actually it made it better in my opinion. The New Camps do not have a wardrobe at all, and they have a bigger bathroom that has a sink in it, but with such a small camper, like you don't need a sink in your bathroom and then a sink right across from your bathroom for the kitchen, because it's like this little bitty pop down sink that I feel like you could barely like get your hands in. So you take out all this space by having this bigger bathroom, which it's still a wet bath, but you have to like drape this curtain around the whole thing. Anyway, by doing that you don't have a wardrobe, and I just can't imagine like where you brought your clothes. Like I don't know where people put their clothes, or there's no pantry or wardrobe. Yeah, so only lower cabinets. And ours, the smaller bathroom, wet bath also, but no sink in there. So you have a full wardrobe and you have a full pantry.
Yeah. That was really the main thing.
That was the main thing.
The dealer had both campers that we were considering.
Yeah.
And we were like, where's all the storage in this one?
Again, because of the bigger bathroom, it's like a little bubble area when you walk in. And so the wall's curved because the bathroom is bigger, so it takes up more floor space, and ours just goes like straight like an alley.
Yeah.
And so you get more floor space with ours too.
I think another reason we bought that camper was just for the size and the weight of it too. The aesthetics, like you can't really get a teardrop camper that's much bigger than what ours is. I can't think of any that they make, maybe some R-Pods or something. But
yeah, I think this is the biggest size, of course, of the one that the company we have makes, and the New Camps.
Like technically you can tow, we had a 4Runner when we bought this, and technically it's like it falls within the towing capacity of the 4Runner, 5,000 pounds. This thing weighs like 3,000 pounds dry, but by the time you put all your
3,500 dry, and so once you put your stuff in, and you're close to like
you're close
4,000 plus. Yeah, so that's why we got it, because we could pull it with the 4Runner, and we didn't want to have to buy a truck. And we just camped in Austin for the first few times, and it was like our wheels were spinning. We could tell that like the camper was in control and we were not in control, and it didn't feel like a safe situation. And we ended up renting a truck to see if like it felt better, because I have pulled boats all my life, so I'm very used to pulling things. And I was just like, this does not feel safe pulling this camper. We rented a truck, and it was so much difference, like having something with like double the towing capacity than the camper weighs. So we quickly were like, yes, we need to buy a truck and feel like we can, because that's what we wanted, is be like when we did that trip all the way to Idaho, we never would have pulled that camper to Idaho with the 4Runner.
It would have pushed us to Idaho. But
our next dream is to buy an old Airstream that we can just like use as a project thing and renovate ourselves. I mean, I feel like that's like probably the dream of a lot of people, and it's hard to find.
Just go on YouTube.
And we see that like a lot of them have like leak issues. So if you get them, and like the whole flooring and the frame needs to be redone. Yeah. But anyway, I think that would be really fun to just like completely redo it, because while I do love the teardrop, I like feel like we quickly like feel congested in there, and there's nowhere to like sit to hang out other than like at a table. Yeah. I would love to like, if we spent more time in there, like longer trips, you want to, like at the end of the day, you want to sit in a couch situation or something like that. Right. You don't want to either have to go from like a table or just like sit in the bed.
Yeah. A lot of people do that, and we've learned in watching other people on YouTube. And when you're camping, you spend a lot of time outside too, but it is nice to have. But sometimes
it's not the perfect weather to be outside, especially if you're going for like, if you're going months at a time, or even a month or weeks, it could be a day when it's raining.
Yeah, for sure.
And you needed to be in your camper. So anyway, that was a long answer about that. Sorry about that.
You got any other camper questions? Send us a message.
Let's get back to the
We got a lot of
opinions. What is the difference between high bar and low bar squats besides the obvious?
I like how they threw that in there at the end. Well, so we wouldn't just say, well, one is high and one is low.
One is high.
But we should talk about like what does that mean?
Yeah. So it's high bar and low bar is about where you place the bar on your back. High being high up, right? On your traps.
For the people watching on YouTube, why don't you demonstrate on me where the high is?
High bar, not on top of your neck, but right here. And then low bar slid down just a little bit right on the top of the spine of your scapula right here.
About 3 inches lower, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So it all has to do, anytime that we're squatting, we want the load to be directly over midfoot.
Why is that? So we don't fall over as we squat.
Yes. So the reason the bar placement changes is because the back torso changes. So if you're
other way around, you have to, your back has to change.
Your back has to change based on where you put the bar. So if the bar, come back over here again, if the bar is in a high bar position, he can have a more upright torso. If the bar is in the low bar position, he has to have a more bent over. You have a rounded back.
The barbell was really light.
A more
horizontal
torso position. Right. So,
in layman's terms, low bar squats, you got to bend over.
Yeah.
Yeah. High bar, you got to stay
I'm trying
upright.
to think of whenever we went to starting strength, and we, of course, coached the low bar.
You have to put a parental warning on this episode if you use a direct quote.
Evidently, I have very long from the knee to the hip bone legs.
Femurs.
And so I've always had a hard time with both squats. Just squats are just not the thing that's easy for me because of the length of my legs. And the guy was like, you have long ass legs. You got to bend the F over get based on the length of my leg, I needed to bend over more than the average person, I guess. Anyway, high bar squats are a little bit more quad dominant. So you're going to use, since you're in that upright position, you're going to use more quads to stand up out of it. And this lift is preferred by Olympic lifters and CrossFitters because of the overlap into their sport.
Yeah. The carry over with the specific exercises, like coming out of a clean, you're in a front squat position.
And I would say this is where beginners begin. There's you haven't been coached on a squat and you just place the bar on your back naturally, and most people will place it a little bit too high, but it's in that just high bar on top of your shoulders position. Low bar recruits more muscles. It recruits more of your posterior chain as you drive your hips out, so more of your hamstrings, more of your glutes. Since that chest is more forward, and it's preferred by more weight lifters because of the more muscle recruitment.
More power lifters.
Power lifters because of the increased muscle recruitment.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people think it's body, just like I was saying, I have long legs. I think a lot of people think it's body type dominant. Okay, if you are this body type, you do this squat. If you're this body type, you do that squat. And I don't think that's true. I think some people refer to the high bar squat as the uncoached squat. Like I said, a lot of beginners will just put the bar naturally there. So I think it just takes some practice in playing with that low bar position to get it right. And we have found that anytime people have trouble with a squat, we can get them easier into that low bar position to have a better quality of squat.
Especially if they struggle with depth.
Yeah, than they can with that high bar position.
I like the low bar squat for people because it forces you to get your butt back because you have to bend over more. And what that does is allow you to push your knees out to the sides a little bit easier, which helps you get depth. Because if you look at somebody who's struggling to get depth in a squat, 9 times out of 10, they have the bar in a high bar position. And the first thing they do when they squat down is shove their knees really far forward and shove their butt kind of forward or straight down too. And you just get to this jammed up position when you do that, where you just can't squat any lower because your knees can't go any further forward. They can't bend anymore. But in the low bar, as your hips go back, you're putting so much of the hinging action on your hips, which moves all the strength and power to your butt, that you can just sit back like it's in a chair and hit depth more naturally.
Yeah, and there's a great drill that we learned at our starting strength seminars that we were going to about using that hip drive. As you would, get in your squat stance, squat down to the bottom, have someone push on your hips, and then you drive out of that squat as if you were pushing their weight off. And it really teaches you how to drive up hips first versus stand by just bringing your chest up.
Yeah. And overall, like you said, power lifters use the low bar squat because it involves more muscle mass, all the adductors, the hamstrings, the glutes, so you can lift more weight. It's going to get you stronger. So we kind of preferentially skew our squats towards low bar squat because we're really using the squat to drive strength. And then we're using accessory type squats like front squats, goblet squats, dumbbell front squats for a supplement to not only drive more strength, but for the hypertrophy side.
Yeah.
We want to build the base of your strength with the squat, the deadlift, the press by lifting the most weight we can safely lift and then supplementing for size.
Yeah, like
with
build
the
those
accessory.
quads with your front squats, which even more quad dominant.
Right.
Something like that. Last piece about this. Have the right shoes. We talked about
Amen.
this a few podcasts ago, but
Preach.
either way that you're squatting, get some correct squatting. Like you don't always have to have lifters, especially if you're new, but once you're an established squatter, yes, let's get some lifters, invest in those because you can probably keep them for a decade.
Yeah.
But make sure that you are wearing proper shoes for any kind of squat that you're doing.
If you went bowling, if you joined a bowling league and you just kept going in your flip-flops and your bowling game never improved.
Yeah.
And somebody came up to you and said, you could keep everything the same and be so much better of a bowler if you would just get some bowling shoes.
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, that makes perfect sense. Your squat form and therefore your strength will be improved if you get the right kind of shoes for the sport that you're doing. So it's important.
And even, I found you can kind of like harass people a little bit more in an in-person gym. So if someone walked in my gym with like the wrong shoes on, I'd quickly be like, hey, all right, you're new here, but you got the wrong shoes on, blah, 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 blah. And I think I've talked about this before, but you can quickly tell if someone has like too spongy of a shoe on by like the footprints they leave on a black mat, just like the dust that their shoes collect. But
those Yeezys aren't going to cut it.
But like coaching online, I found it's harder to convince people to buy the right shoes because number one, sometimes they're just working out at home and it's just like, this is the shoes you were wearing. Or, you just like, you don't have that in person, like, hey, this person every day telling you got the wrong shoes on. So,
and they're not looking around the gym seeing that they're the only one wearing running shoes.
Yeah, that's true. Like you go into like a CrossFit gym and you're like, okay, everybody in here is wearing like one of three types of shoes. Like I'm obviously like on the wrong shoes here.
I wore my Timberlands in here. What am I doing?
Anyway, I'd like to say, like it's.
Go buy your shoes, people.
All right, last
Link
one.
in bio.
I think I understand what progressive overload is, but can you explain it for me?
I feel like this episode is getting pretty long, so let's try to keep this one simple because I could talk about this for a long time.
Well, let me explain it then really quickly because there's just a one sentence. Progressive overload. Do a little bit more, whether that is a few more reps, add more weight, or both each time you work out. Just a little bit more, even if it's one rep more.
Yeah.
And the key to this is journaling, having a journal, whether it's online or in a book, knowing what you did last time. Dumbbell row, I did 12, 10, 9 with 40 pounds. Today I'm going to try to get 12, 10, 10.
Yeah.
You have a goal.
Yeah. If I could put one more little...
You want to go, I can tell looking at his face. He wants to go for 10 minutes right now.
I'll just put one little pin on there. It's like, this isn't a plug to hire us, but find somebody you can trust or do your own research online to kind of figure out what's the best way for you to safely use progressive overload. Because like you said, there's a lot of different ways. Like there's increasing the amount of pounds that you're lifting, the number of reps that you're doing, the number of sets that you're doing, the number of times per week that you're doing that thing, the range of motion that you're using. There's a lot of different ways to use it. And, this is why we coach people one-on-one is because we could guide them towards the best way for them. So I can't tell you through this podcast the best way for you because there's a million different variables, but do some research on it. But I'm glad that you're thinking about it because it is the thing that will unlock new levels of results for you, guaranteed.
And either videoing yourself or having someone watch that video, you can see like also the intensity that you're using that weight with. So if your dumbbell rows just look like you're slinging weight around, a coach or a friend or somebody could look at it and be like, hey, that looks way too light. I think you could go up in weight.
Yeah.
Or if a coach then is like, oh, wait, you're not fully getting the range of motion. Like for a dumbbell row, we want the elbow to peek over the line of the body there. If we're using, 75 pounds, but we're only getting this much, a coach might be like, okay, let's go down in weight and go some more reps so we can work that full range of motion.
That's a good point. You just made me think of something else when you're saying that. Is like, yes, you don't waste a lot of time using progressive overload if you're nowhere even close to the capacity that you can do. Like you use example like a dumbbell row, like, all right, this week I did 10, 10, 10. Next week I did 11, 11, 11. Next week 12, 12. Well, what if like you actually could have done that 20 times? Yeah,
Right.
you were progressively overloading week after week after week, but you were so far from the potential of what you had when you started, you wasted a ton of time. You know, you should be still working at like an RPE 7, 8 most of the time as you progressively overload.
And we've talked about this many times, but watching the speed of the lift as you get near that end of that set is how you tell.
Right.
If the speed on rep 1 is exactly the speed of rep 10, you aren't working at that intensity level yet. But if the speed of rep 8 starts to slow, you rep out 9 and then you're 10, but you didn't go to failure, you're like, okay, you're there.
Yep.
You're doing it at the right intensity.
And all these examples that we've given so far about lifting weights, but progressive overload works in anything in your life that you want to get better at. It could be, you know, reading. I'm going to read 1 page a day. Then I'm going to read 2 pages a day. Building up your cardio capacity, like
burpees, 1 a day, then 2 a day.
Whatever. It's the stress adaptation cycle. Like use it in all different areas of your life, both in the gym and out. It works for a lot of different things. In your nutrition, making positive changes to your nutrition, like progressively overload the changes that you're trying to make with your health. You know, start small, do a little bit more, get good at that, do a little bit more.
It just made me think of our client. Shout out our client who she broke her leg and did not stop training. We continued to train.
She was dancing at a wedding.
And foot got stuck in the flooring and a bad femur break. She did not stop training. We trained upper body up until this week. And this week she's gotten the clear from her doctor. We are starting back progressively over. I mean, she's already gone through, we've been training for over 2 years already, but progressively overloading squats. We're squatting to a very high target right now. We're going to stay there until we're comfortable. We're going to reduce the size of the target and get lower and lower. And then we will add weight and, you know, probably with a single goblet. And then we will go to dumbbell front squats. And that is how we're going to progressively overload her getting back into squatting, something that she was doing, you know.
Oh, and this
4
client
months ago.
has a prosthetic knee also. So what's your excuse out there?
And she's in her 70s.
Right.
So
hashtag no excuses.
Hashtag no excuses. Love it.
All right.
That's it.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, before you go, if this is your first time listening, subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening to this on Apple, Spotify, or on the YouTube. We'll check you guys out next week.